there was always a section who said, "Oh, is it really true?" What I want to tell to your audience is, what you saw in Kashmir file was just 5%, not even 5%, of what actually has happened to Kashmiri Hindus. If they would have killed 30 Kashmiri Hindus, maybe we would not have been having this conversation today. If you see the pre-Kashmir files era, how many people knew about 1990? Back in 90s, Kashmiri Hindu genocide, we were given only 3 options. And in Kashmiri, they say, "Relo, chalo, ya dele." So you either convert, become a Muslim, you either flee or you die. It was a genocide of the aboriginal and peaceful people of that region who have been living there from last 5,000 plus years. Earlier this month in April, our community celebrated 5,101th New Year, Saptarishi Samvat. It's 5101. So we have been exterminated basically from that land which belongs to us. And nobody talked about it in the main media. Now if I go back to Pahalgam attack, 2 out of 4 or 5 terrorists who have been confirmed were locals. They belong to the same region. So they, without having the local support, without having the cover, there's no way you can execute these type of massacres. So tourism cannot be a barometer. And I know there were attempts by the government lately to showcase as if everything has returned to normalcy in Kashmir and everything is good and this and that. Tourism is a different ballgame because you are feeding their economy. And tourist has a return ticket in his pocket. He's not going to settle there. You go there and try to settle and see what happens. If you want to go to the source of all of this, it all stems from a radical mindset, which is not inclusive, which doesn't subscribe to any other thought process. And it only believes that their thought process has the right to live.
Hello and welcome to OpenMind, where we dive into the issues that matter to every proud Indian. Today, we're talking about a tragedy that has shaken the nation. On April 22nd, 2025, Pahalgam Massacre happened, where 26 tourists, mostly Hindus, were brutally killed by Pakistan-backed terrorists who singled out the victims simply for their faith. This attack is not just an assault on our people, it's an attack on India's Hindu soul. It's a continuation of the same hatred that drove the Kashmiri Pandit genocide in 1990 and also going back 70 years fueled the partition in 1947. Joining me today is Amit Raina. He's a Kashmiri Pandit who was born in beautiful yet turbulent Srinagar, Kashmir, and whose life was profoundly shaped by the traumatic events of the 1990 Kashmiri Hindu genocide. With his family, he fled the valley in 1990 at the age of 9 years, and he grew up in Jammu. He now lives in Houston and plays an active role in several community-focused organizations like the Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora. Amit, thank you for being here and to share your perspectives.
Thank you, Kapilji, and thanks for having me here on OpenMind.
Okay, so let's focus a little bit on the Pahalgam massacre itself. Can you just tell all our audience what exactly happened in Pahalgam?
So what we saw in Pahalgam, what happened a few days back, it is basically a continuation of what we as a community, a peaceful community, Kashmiri Hindus have gone through. So basically, 4 to 5 terrorists, just to give a recap, they actually singled out Hindu tourists. Pahalgam is on the outskirts of Srinagar, and there is a particular point, Barsana Valley, within the Pahalgam. It's at a peak. So it's very famous for tourism. It's all open. So it was strategically chosen to be that point because it is, as I said, it's cut off from the main road. You have to literally walk to that, right? So they chose this spot where even if some help has to be needed and all that, it will take a lot of time for the forces and all. So they chose this point and they singled out Hindus. And if you see, they basically check their IDs. They ask them to identify themselves. Are you Hindu? Are you Muslim? Then they check their IDs. And I feel really sad to say that they asked them to lower down their trousers to make sure they were Hindus or not. So then they started killing them. And again, as I said, this is something which is not new. I'm sorry to say that it's not new to our community, and we are not shocked at all. I am not shocked personally because I have seen it happen dozens of times. And 1990, even from 1990 till 2025, till Pahalgam happened, there has been dozens of massacres, Hindu massacres, which basically follow the same template. So it has happened in the past. It's just that this time it got some media attention. And since tourists were coming from pan India, they were not Kashmiri Hindus. With our community, it's been happening. But now these tourists were from all the parts of the world, right? So that's how this became now on the, it's everywhere. But the central theme behind all this is nothing new for us. It's just an extension of the same recursive events which we have seen unfolded in front of us over and over again.
So you see this as a continuation of a series of events.
Yes.
The same template, the same pattern, just repeating itself.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is it's getting more attention because in some cases the victims were from the rest of India. Right. But I think your community in some ways has been singled out for no one standing up for them.
Exactly. And again, last year also in 2024, there was a Hindu massacre in Riyasi, which falls in the Jammu region. So there were tourists who were going to, not tourists, they were actually localized, they were going to Shiv Khori, which is one of the celebrated religious place in that area, Riyasi. So they were killed. And I don't know, it came on news, but it was not a big headline. And if we go back, I mean, we have a list of massacres. And we have isolated incidents also happening in Kashmir. Like in last 3-4 years, we have seen so many isolated incidents where people got killed because of their faith. And since it was lesser in number, it didn't came up in the news. I don't even remember seeing it in a major news channel. But yes, this time what has happened, as I said, since it has happened to pan India, the tourists were from all over the India. That's how it became so big, but nothing new.
So you mentioned a couple of times that the people who were killed were actually singled out for their faith.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people, some commentators are trying to downplay the religious angle of this massacre, right? Mm-hmm. They're basically calling it a political attack or attack based on Pakistan's back terrorists, which are looking for independent Kashmir or whatever, right? As a Kashmiri Hindu and a Kashmiri Pandit, what's your take on that?
I mean, you will always see those narratives which run out. I don't know. I mean, if you have seen New York Times, the way they try to play it out, they wanted to show it as if some mad gunman came out of the blue and randomly started shooting, but that's not the case. As I said, we have seen this in front of our eyes, so we know what it is. It is purely radical Islamist ideology driven terrorism, which doesn't subscribe to any other faith other than theirs. And that's what they have been doing. So I know media will try to whitewash. That's what they are very good at, some of media channels, but that's not the case. I mean, it is purely driven by the faith. That's why they were singled out, and that's how they have done it. I mean, if you see it. So I don't subscribe to what some of the media channels say out there, because we have seen it happening. I mean, it's nothing new for us. When we were, as I said, back in 90s, Kashmiri Hindu genocide, we were given only 3 options. And in Kashmiri, they say, Reliv, Chaliv, ya Diliv. So you either convert, become a Muslim, you either flee, or you die. So it's the same template. I don't see any change in that. So that's what we have seen. So we were killed because of our faith. We had to leave that place because of our faith. So one fine night or one fine morning of 500,000 people, that's the darkest night in our history, January 19th, we were forced to leave that valley, and that because of our faith. So that is what I want to emphasize. It's all because of our faith. It has all happened.
You're drawing a very stark parallel between the Pahalgam Massacre and the events that happened in Jan of 1990. Mm-hmm. Kashmiri Pandit genocide of 1990. Can you talk about that a little?
Right. So again, what happened in 1990, again, it actually started in 86 with the Anantnag riots. So there's a place in Kashmir, it's again one in the outskirts called Anantnag. That's where the 1986, we had a big riots. There were thousands of people who were looted, killed. And that's where the first migration, if I want to call it, that's a wrong word to use, by the way, but that's what people call in the media. So they flee that time. And then subsequently in 89, 90, when they started doing the target killings of our community members. So Pandit Tikalal Taplu being one of our tallest leader, Sarvanand Kaur Premi, Premnath Bhatt, I mean the list can go on and on, Justice Neelkant Penju. They were all our stalwarts, leaders, and well-known community members. So they got killed on broad daylight by the people who are still roaming scot-free. They haven't still been tried in the courts. So we're still waiting for justice for those people. And on top of that, thousands of our community members. There's a whole list. I don't know if you have seen Kashmir Files, which was just a, it was a, there were 700 plus families who spoke about the atrocities, and then that movie came into being. It was just a tip of iceberg.
Yeah.
For what they could have shown in two and a half. I know some people really felt bad when they saw that, and there was always a section who said, "Oh, is it really true?" I heard people asking me, "Tell me, is it really true?" But what I want to tell to your audience is, what you saw in Kashmir File was just 5%, not even 5%, of what actually has happened to Kashmiri Hindus in Kashmir.
So, given the fact that you were there and you were the one who were forced to flee their homes and their ancestral places, ancestral lands, to be refugees on your own country, I think the two things I want to do. One is explain to me why is that, for example, the 1986 Anantnag riot, there isn't a whole lot of history that is taught to us about those riots. We're not told about those riots. I don't think the newspapers covered it as well as they should have. Why is that the coverage for all of this has been so low in the papers and the media?
It's a cover-up. I mean, if I leave the 86, the 90 genocide, where do you see it? If you see the pre-Kashmir Files era, how many people knew about 1990, other than obviously we and our immediate friends? But if you talk to somebody in South India, did he know what happened in Kashmir in 1990? No. So there was no media coverage. The government purposely, that whole ecosystem actually, I'll not just say government because there are so many players into it, they hided it because it was going to show bad on them. Because see, it was a genocide. It was not just mass murder or mass killing or massacre. It was a genocide of the aboriginal and peaceful people of that region who have been living there from last 5,000 plus years. This month in April, our community celebrated 5,101th New Year. Can you believe it? Our calendar goes back 5101. Saptarishi calendar which we follow, Saptarishi Samvat. It's 5101. So we have been exterminated basically from that land which belongs to us. And nobody talked about it in the main media. From the reasons known, central government, local government. I mean, there's a whole, what happened, right? Our chief minister resigned a day before and all of that. So they always try to put it under the rug. But again, since nowadays the social, if Pahalgam attack, if we would not have had the social media and the press, maybe they could have, if they would have killed 30 Kashmiri Hindus, maybe we would not have been having this conversation today.
So it looks like that there was almost a concerted effort by the local governments, the state governments, even the central governments, maybe even the media included, not to let some of the news actually get out to the rest of India.
Right. It was a whole ecosystem. And then again, I always say that it's not only the person who executes the mission who is responsible for it. So I'll not blame only the 4 or 5 terrorists who actually executed the Pahalgam massacre. It's the whole ecosystem behind them who provides them the ground support. Now, if I go back to Pahalgam attack, 2 out of 4 or 5 terrorists who have been confirmed were locals. They belong to the same region. So they, without having the local support, without having the cover, there's no way you can execute these type of massacres.
So one of the things that we have been hearing all along for the last several years is that Kashmir has changed, right? After Article 370 and 35A, Kashmir has basically arisen to a new morning. And it looks like to me that if there are local people who are engaged in genocide, it doesn't look like it has changed quite that much. So explain to me, what did we mean by Kashmir has changed and it's changed a new chapter, versus when you still see local Kashmiri youth engaging in genocide like this?
See, if you ask me, and again, I'll speak of my personal experience because I have gone through it firsthand. I'm one of the survivors of that genocide. I don't see Kashmir has changed. The media and the government, and they may try to give a gory picture of like, oh, the tourism has gone up and all, but that's not the barometer for peace. If our killers are still running scot-free, if our killers are still roaming, if we still are waiting for justice, how can you say that peace has returned to Kashmir, first of all? Because our killers, I see them there. I mean, they're on the TVs. We see them. They are still there. If you cannot provide justice to a community which was driven out of their homeland, how can we say the peace has returned? Unless our community is rehabilitated back, and we cannot just go back and settle wherever we want, because how can I trust my neighbor anymore? Because the same neighbor was responsible for my genocide in 1990. So tourism cannot be a barometer. And I know there were attempts by the government lately to showcase as if everything has returned to normalcy in Kashmir and everything is good and this and that. Tourism is a different ballgame because you are feeding their economy. And tourist has a return ticket in his pocket. He's not going to settle there. You go there and try to settle and see what happens. So the resistance front, which basically claimed the responsibility for the attack, which happened in Pahalgam, backed by Lashkar-e-Taiba, if you look at their mission statement, they basically are saying that we'll not let anyone settle in Kashmir. We don't want to change the demographics of Kashmir.
So money is welcome, people are not.
Money is welcome as long as you have a return ticket.
As long as you don't settle.
Yes. Yeah. So what happened, I'm not saying what happened, abrogation of Article 370 was not good. That is one of the precursors for the long-term solution. But just saying that that fixed everything will be a wrong picture to draw. And just measuring peace and stability based on tourism, again, will be a wrong picture to draw. But what happened in Pahalgam basically defies everything now. So the tourist also is not safe, right? Earlier they used to, as I said, in last 4 or 5 years, they have been killing our people, but that never made to the news. Rahul Bhatt being one of the examples.
That happened in 22.
Bindruji, he was a chemist, so he was. So there are so many names. Ajay Bhartiji, he was a sarpanch. So they were all isolated incidents, but they never made to media because, again, as I said, we have a very minuscule population around, and we are scattered all around the world.
So you don't,
we don't constitute
vote banks.
We are not the part of vote bank. We don't constitute a vote bank for anyone. So that's why we were not given that media attention, and nobody heard us. So that's what I keep saying. Thanks to Kashmir Files, at least people started talking about us. At least they started recognizing or acknowledging at least what happened to us.
It's pretty heart-wrenching knowing that a community basically can go through so much within their own country, and that too after independence. Somehow it seems that this is the same hateful ideology that basically caused India's partition in the first place. And I don't know whether it's Pakistan taking advantage of some of our divisions, or our divisions that are basically being the root cause of some of this that's happening.
Right.
Hard to tell.
Yeah. It's, again, if you want to go to the source of all of this, it all stems from a radical mindset, which is not inclusive, which doesn't subscribe to any other thought process. and it only believes that their thought process has the right to live, and anybody who is not part of that thought process is deemed as kafir, basically. Anybody who doesn't believe in that ideology is a non-believer, is a kafir, and he doesn't deserve to live.
And you were a first-hand victim of some of this.
Right.
So could you recall some of the things that you experienced on in Jan of 1990 that you experienced firsthand that basically, you know, brings back the memories of those dark nights of Jan of 1990
Yes.
that you were forced to relive when you heard about the Pahalgam Massacre?
Right. So as I said, 86 is when Anantnag thing started, and then 89 is when again this whole thing started. They started with the selected killings, targeted killings of our community leaders. And then what happened in January 1990 was, it was a culmination of all the, so I still remember that night, we were watching, we just had our dinner and we were watching, there was I think a movie coming on Doordarshan. And all of a sudden, I think at 10:30ish in the night, all the louds, when Kashmir, I don't know if you have been there, there are mosques in every pocket. So all the mosques in our region, they turned on their loudspeakers and they openly call for jihad, basically. And it was a well calibrated, planned effort, and it was not just happening in ours. We called our relatives, it was happening in the whole entire Kashmir. And they called for action. They basically said that today is, and they said it in Kashmiri, today is the night we had to take our jihad and freedom and this and that. And then what they made those slogans which they used to say from the loudspeaker. And what I remember is we were living, we all came in the main, living room. We all kind of gathered there and turned off our lights and turned off the main door and all of us to make sure we are on. And my cousins were there, my sisters. So one of my uncle, he basically hided them. In every Kashmiri house, if you typically see, there are old houses like 3-4 stories. So we put them somewhere so that they could be safe. And then all of a sudden, all the loudspeakers went off and they called for action. And then we hear people, basically our neighbors, Muslim neighbors, with whom we have been living for hundreds and hundreds of years. They all started marching towards the mosque. And within few minutes, that whole road was occupied, and all the Muslims mostly were on the streets and shouting slogans. And then they started attacking Hindu houses in that night. So I have a lot. I mean, we couldn't sleep that night. We were, I think, awake till 4:35 a.m. all in one room, living room, and just praying that nothing happens to us. But a lot of people got killed that night. A lot of people had to leave next day. There's so many things which happened that night. And that was the start of it. And then after that, every day they used to, every day, every night, that was like a common thing. But that was the first time when it happened. And it was a big shocker for all our community. So basically the call, as I said, was you either convert, we'll otherwise kill you, or you leave. That was the basic idea.
And so how did you escape? And when you escaped, were you thinking that this is like leaving forever, or did you think that you would come back?
We actually always, and again, I keep telling this to my dad and my uncle, so we always thought that nothing can happen to us. We were always in that bubble, Indian government will come into play, the military will save us, and we were in that big, illusion, if I call it. So we left after that. We didn't left on that night, but we left after that, one of the nights. And at that also, it still triggers me how we left, because in Kashmir, in those days, there used to be curfew mostly, because schools were closed. There were no schools, offices were closed. So they used to give us some relief time, like where you can go and buy your daily essentials, groceries. So we had to leave between that time. And how we reached the bus stand and all of that was the challenge, because the relief time and the relaxation time, I think that was used to be 30 minutes or 1 hour max, and nobody would like to take you to the bus stand because obviously the time limit was there. So how we went to bus stand, and then how we left. And then in the bus stand also, I remember at some point in one of the places we were asked to stop because there was some crossfiring going on in that area. And then when our bus had to pass that, we were told to duck down. So that, I mean, those are the memories which I have, and yeah, so that was not a good period.
And that is something that you experienced firsthand.
Yes, I was 8 to 9 years old.
And you were in the bus and you were told
Yeah,
to duck down
because
of the
there's an area called Bijbihara. Bijbihara was the area I remember. First, we were not let go for a while, and then when we were told to duck down, and while we were passing that area. So yeah, it's I mean, if you see the slogans they used to shout, and पाकिस्तान से रिश्ता क्या, ला इला इला इला, आज़ादी का मतलब क्या, ला इला इला इला, यहाँ क्या चलेगा, निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा, लैंड ऑफ शरिया, मुसलमानों जागो, काफिरों को भगाओ, कश्मीर हमारा है. So this is what they used to say. I mean, there were a whole list of slogans which were all pro-Islamic. Because I sometimes talk to people and they say, oh, there was a development issue, and there was never a development issue in Kashmir. Kashmir, if you go back to 1986 or 87, you might have seen all the Bollywood movies would be shot in Kashmir, right? Kashmir was always thriving on tourism. You could see all the big 5-star hotels in Kashmir, Sheraton, Broadway, you name any hotel, it was. We used to watch Hollywood movies there. All the Hollywood movies used to play in Kashmir. So it was not about the development, which people sometimes try to give it a different angle. Oh, it was a development issue, and then there was no. It was a purely radical Islamist ideology, which the localites got into, and that started this whole thing.
I've heard, and sometimes including Kashmiri Pandits say this, that part of the reason why all of this happened was because there was a simmering discontent amongst the local population of the fact that the Kashmiri Pandit diaspora basically occupied all the positions of power and basically accumulated all the wealth and land and things like that. No. What do you say to that?
I know that has come from Barkha Dutt's one of her news bite back in the days. That again comes from the liberal mindset. That's not the case. We never had any political representation in Kashmir. We did the chief minister, ministers, all ministers were mostly non-Hindus. So where was the power we had? Whatever we had was snatched away from us in 1950 by Sheikh Abdullah through that Land Abolition Act. So all the landlords in Kashmir, Hindu landlords, their lands were taken away. 1950 Land Act, which was passed unilaterally in Kashmir. So yes, our people were well educated because we come from our literacy rate is 100%. We come from because Kashmir being land of knowledge, Kashmir is Sharda land. It's a land of Sharda Peeth, the most advanced learning center in the world. So we were not called Pandits because we were priests. We were called Pandits because we excelled in what we were doing. Learned scholars. So people from all across the world, not even India, in the East, they used to come to Kashmir to do the advanced studies, go for advanced studies. Shankar, I mean, there are so many instances. Panini, all these people, they came from Kashmir. I mean, they studied in Kashmir, they wrote in Kashmir. So Kashmir was a place, it was a fountainhead of spirituality back in the days. So Kashmiri Pandits being the scholars, that's how we got that name. So we inherited that, and that all was systematically taken away from the 7 genocides, ethnic cleansings which our community has gone through, and it's a slow process. It started in 39 onwards when Shahmir dynasty came to Kashmir, followed by different rulers.
And I think we did one podcast with Mr. Ashok Moza before, and we talked about some of the history of Kashmir, especially the history of conflict, especially starting the 14th century after Kota Rani. So I think that's definitely well taken. But I think it's very interesting that other than being an educated community, the community did not hold a whole lot of power in Kashmir. In fact, you were not landlords.
Right.
Most of your lands were taken away.
Right.
And you did not have power. Political.
Right. And we used to fail discrimination actually. We didn't get the government jobs. We didn't get. I've heard in REC Srinagar you couldn't get an engineering seat because of being Kashmiri Hindu. So there, it was other way around. So I don't know where this narrative is coming from, because we were discriminated. That's why some people had to go out for jobs, because there were not much opportunities within the Kashmir. So it's not what Barkhadat or somebody has said. That's not true. Yes, we were educated, and that was our strength, and that's what kept us going even today. And so even after 1990, when we were on the streets, basically, virtually on the streets. Yeah. When we left, we just took maybe one suitcase. So we started from scratch. The only way we could do it without taking any arms, because we had to see that it's a very resilient community. We didn't take arms. We didn't reciprocate violence with violence. So we start with the strength lies with our educational background.
I think there's a proverb in Sanskrit which says Vidya Dhanam Sarvadhan Pradhanam. Right. So I think there's a little bit of that. Vidvana Sarvatra Pujyate. So I think that's definitely there. So speaking of the 1990 genocide, why does classifying that as a genocide matter to you? Because it was never classified as a genocide, correct?
It is not. And we have been asking for that, and it's not being
So why is it important for you that it basically gets the legitimate recognition?
Right, it should. And there are certain legal aspects to it. If it is called a genocide or recognized a genocide, then the government is answerable. Then there are certain provisions which it has to follow. So I think that is one of the reasons they are trying to not recognize it as a genocide and shy away from it, because there is some legal from the international law. If you go through the genocide law, I mean, if you look at the criteria, there are major 5 criteria for anything to be called a genocide, and we do meet all the criteria. Our community meets all the criteria. It was an ethnic cleansing based on faith. So we do meet all those. We check all the 5 conditions for genocide. Why they don't call it a genocide? It may have some other implications, which then they have to answer to the international body, which they don't want to. That's why they want to keep it. They want to call it a migration, or they want to give it any refugee name. But the migration is. Can you believe in the independent India, in our own country, we had to leave our own place?
And basically
called migration.
Go become refugees.
Migration.
And start to live in refugee camps.
Right, in our own country. And this is not even partition, or this is not even some, Aurangzeb time and ruler and all. This is an independent country, a democratically independent country. And you are refugees, so-called refugees, they call us, in your own country. How is that possible?
Bringing the conversation back to the Pahalgam angle and connecting it still to the 1990 Kashmiri Pandit genocide, what is the role of, you talked about the fact that obviously there was a lot of hatred and feeling within the Kashmiri population there that led to what happened. What's the role of Pakistan in all of this? Is Pakistan only exploiting the fault lines that already existed, or is there something more to it? Is Pakistan also fomenting some of those divisions? We talk about
it's both. So the fault lines always exist, then only you can exploit it. So they are exploiting it, because Pakistan, as we know, is the epicenter of terror, and this is nothing. Even if you leave the Pahalgam attack aside, look at any global attack happening anywhere in the world. You whether call it 9/11, you call it 26/11, you call it 7/7 London bombing, or you call any attack, any major global attack happening anywhere in the world. If you do your math and you start tracing the roots, you will end up in Pakistan. So Pakistan is the epicenter of terror. Now they have, I don't know if you know about in 1980s, later 80s, General Ziaul Haq, After they tried all their 65, 71, and all those conventional wars, they figured out they couldn't win a war with India, one on one. So he came up with Operation Tupac, and the basic, if you find that out, so Operation Tupac goal was basically to cut India 1,000 cuts, basically give it, to create these, to penetrate within the ecosystem of India, to activate all these sleeper cells, to create an ecosystem which, which promotes this mindset. So it's part of that design, Operation Tupac, and that's what they did in Kashmir. So unless there is local support, Pakistan cannot do it. But that doesn't, I'm not giving them a waiver. They are the epicenter of terror. This all comes from Pakistan. But again, it has a local support within Kashmir, because they see Kashmir is a Muslim majority state. So this is the right place for them. And look at now West Bengal. Look at Bangladesh. What happened in Bangladesh last year, or what's happening there today. You can see it's the same template. West Bengal, what happened last month in Murshidabad? There was a mass migration. Hundreds and thousands of Hindus had to leave their place in Murshidabad.
It almost feels like that there is a geopolitical angle to it as well, and there is a religious angle to it as well. Maybe Pakistan, for example, is trying to exploit some of the fault lines within India, but essentially some of those fault lines exist because of the religious differences.
Right. I mean, geopolitics is obviously there because Pakistan is a failed economy, failed country. So everybody is, trying to play their part in that part of the region. But going back to the question you just asked, Pakistan is playing to the fault line. Yes, they are playing to the fault line. But then again, I will look beyond Pakistan here. I look beyond the fault lines. I will say, and again, this comes from my personal experience. It's way beyond both of them. Yes, for now, if we had to take action, we had to go to the source, and source is Pakistan military, Pakistan ISI. But if you ask me what is a full-term solution for all this, then it's beyond all that. It's beyond Pakistan. It's beyond our sleeper cells. It will take you back to that ideology,
so
which is creating this mindset.
So I think that basically was my next question. Where do we go from here, really? I think there is a geopolitical angle to it, which is Pakistan, its ability to fund the terrorists, and its ability to, or its intent to, meddle into India's affairs and things like that. But like you said, there is a fault line that we have internal to us as well. How do we address that?
So I think there has to be strict actions taken, and you have to take those internally as well as with our neighbor. When you say internally, you have to clean up those sleeper cells. And I believe that's what they are trying to do right now in Kashmir. So unless there is an infrastructural support, and again, going after the terrorist who executes this is not the only solution. You have to go after the ecosystem. You have to go after people who give them cover fire in India. And that's not just one person, there's a whole ecosystem. There's a social angle to it, economic angle to it, political angle to it. So you have to go all out. That is one part of it. Then externally, obviously, and I'm hoping something will happen this time. And I'm not a war monger right now, but I'm just saying, because unless you look at where it's coming from, I'll be very clear, it's coming from Rawalpindi, where you have the
GHQ headquarters.
It's all, and I don't know if you saw the speech with the Pakistan Army chief gave just before the Pahalgam attack, I think a week or 2 weeks before. So unless you go, that's the immediate. But in the long term, if you ask me how this can be handled, I will say the whole civilized world has to come together and look at it collectively, because just having a limited war or doing a surgical strike is not the final answer for all this. It will all come back to the same radical mindset, and people have to come together, civilized world. I know we can look at France, we can look at Belgium, we can look at Europe, we can look at London. It's happening everywhere. So the sooner they all come to the table and start looking and identifying what is the root cause. Root cause, yes, you can trace it to Pakistan, but it's bigger than that.
So I think a lot of times, and this is one thing I've heard a lot of times, a lot of people make that argument that when people are not well off, when they are not making enough money, then they basically get swept up with this ideology. And I think the argument that was made for Kashmir was, if the people are going to be prosperous, if, for example, there is ample tourism, for example, a lot of people will go there, and the local population will start to see the benefit of mingling and interacting with people outside of their own bubble, and they will be far less radical. I think I kind of started to believe in some of that, especially when I heard that people in POK are now clamoring to be a part of the Indian Kashmir, because they said, oh well, the inflation is so high, we cannot even afford the basic groceries or the electricity, and see how people on the Indian side of Kashmir are enjoying. So they basically wanted to come on to this side to be able to enjoy some of the fruits of the Indian economic progress in the last 30 odd years. So the question is, do you subscribe to that?
No, I don't. Because Kashmir has always been a place for tourists, even before 1990. As I said earlier in a comment, all the Bollywood movies, you take Amitabh Bachchan's, Shami Kapoor's, all the songs, all those, they used to, Bollywood, Yash Chopra, before going to Switzerland, they used to come to Kashmir. It all started after 90 when they started looking for alternate location. I don't think that was the issue. Kashmir, as I said, that was never the issue. So Kashmir has always been prosperous in that way, and Kashmir has always had tourists. If that was the case, then 90 would not have happened. And if that is the case, then Pahalgam would not have happened. So we cannot have it both ways, right? So I don't think that is the reason that there was no development or there were no jobs. That's not the case.
No, I agree.
Osama bin Laden was an engineer.
And I think
not
even a multi-millionaire, worth literally $400 million.
All the if you go to all the masterminds after of this Hafiz Saeed, they are all well-educated people. Azhar Masood. It has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with development. Yeah, I'm not saying that they don't misuse. If there is a lot out there who is not working, yes, they are easy praise for them.
Yeah.
But is that the reason for it? No, that's not the reason. The reason is something else, and that's what our liberal media tries to do. They try to give it a different flavor. That is not the case.
I think and I may have been a little bit of critical of Modi in the past as well. I think the point that was being raised repeatedly from the BJP side was, oh, these were the disenfranchised youth that used to throw rocks on the Indian army, and the moment you basically made more IAS out of those, the moment you gave them laptops, and the moment there was more tourism in the valley, so things started to change for the better. And after 2019, when 35A and 370 were taken off, I think they were getting a lot more involved with the mainstream. So you're saying that
I don't personally subscribe to that. As long as that ideology remains same, doesn't matter whether the person is throwing the stone or whether he's an IS officer. If he is subscribing to the same ideology, which is the root cause of all this, then it's even more dangerous for him to empower him and to make him IS than keeping him on the streets and throwing stones.
Okay.
That's how I look at it.
Okay. So staying on the topic of geopolitics a little bit more, a lot of people say that, purely from the timing perspective, there seems to be ample evidence that opportunistically China seems to be behind this. And the reason why maybe the whole game gets played that way is China knew, for example, that the Trump administration is going to take power in the US. And they knew that Trump would come really hard on China from the tariffs perspective, from the trade perspective. And China's biggest power right now is trade, tariffs, and the money that they're able to make from the rest of the world. They knew that US cannot wean off all the manufacturing that gets done in China in a day. So they will have to look for quick alternatives. And India, probably based on its size, its manufacturing power, and its economic output, seems to be mostly one of the most natural replacement for China. So China wanted India not to get that particular role. China wanted India not to be in the position where it can actually be deemed as a stable country, which is a reasonable replacement for China, especially from a consumer society like the US. And so they wanted India to be engulfed in problems on both sides, from the Pakistan side and from the Bangladesh side. And I think some of the things that Bangladesh has been doing in the last several months and some things that Pakistan has been doing are very timely in getting India involved into some things. Now, Apple, for example, came back and said all the iPhones that get sourced into the US are going to be now made in India. And I think my point is that this could be the start of a wave that China does not want to happen. And so China wants India to be a less than favored destination for some of this manufacturing to happen. So they wanted to create geopolitical difficulties in India's neighborhood. And China has a hand in Bangladesh. I mean, Muhammad Yunus. He went to China and called himself the guardian of the seas. And then Pakistani people have also gone to China, and China obviously funds Pakistan to the tune of billions of dollars and is making the CPEC that India is opposed to. So I think from a geopolitical perspective, it looks like China has a vested interest in destabilizing India and could be using Pakistan and Bangladesh at this opportune time to do some of that.
And I don't rule out that. Obviously, that can be possible. Because as I said, Pakistan is a failed country, so it can fall into anyone's hands. Earlier, it used to be America's puppet. Now it's a Chinese puppet. We know all of that. But if you go back to the history, whenever American president or any American convoy used to visit India, they will always have some terror attack. And it was true when Clinton visited India. When Trump visited India, I don't know if you remember a few years back, there were riots in Delhi, on the streets of Delhi. And then this J.D. Vance visit again coincided with the Pahalgam attack. So it has always been the case because, again, as I said, after 370 abrogation, Pakistan and what is happening in Pakistan recently in Balochistan and their internal, because they're internally also very destabilized right now with the economy and all that. So their military was losing grounds, and they wanted to do this. Maybe it's part of that exercise, make image makeover exercise, because people started questioning their military. And China, as I said, I don't rule out that angle. That can be the bigger picture. They want to, confront India on multiple sides so that it gets engaged in that. But what I'm trying to say is, even if that is true, India still has to go after Pakistan and the source, because it is the same country. As I said, when Clinton visited, they did the same thing. Maybe that time China didn't use them, some other country used them, but they get played. And it's very dangerous to have a neighbor like that who can get played at any time. So it's better to teach them a lesson this time, so that at least they can see the cost before next. Because the way they did the Pahalgam attack, cannot be done by terrorists. It has to have the kind of planning and the precision they used. It has to be a military style operation, which cannot go without the funding, without the support, and without the cover from Pakistan military. So unless you attach a cost to every action, these things are bound to happen again. So I think this is the high time. And if you ask me what India can do, obviously I'm not a military expert, but there are a lot of options which obviously they are exploring right now. But the main trouble area for Kashmir, since we're talking about Kashmir here, is the POK. That is the infiltration which happens from that region, because that terrain is very hard. We cannot always blame our intelligence and security saying, hey, how come these terrorists come? You cannot do that. It's not Israel. It's not plain. You put some radars and some...
And even Israel could not defend.
Could not defend. So you cannot. It's not a plain ground where you can put some radars, put some lasers, and it's a tough terrain. It's a valley. There are mountains. There are lakes in between. There are forests, dense forest, where you cannot even. There is no visibility. So you cannot. So unless India takes control, and those are the launch pads which Pakistan uses for infiltration, because it gets very hard to monitor those ranges during winter season. So unless India takes control of that tough terrain, which is basically in POK, and takes control of that, I think that will at least solve half of the problems. Then they will have a better visibility on the infiltration.
I think, again, given my technology background, when you were describing this problem to me, I was kind of thinking how this can be solved. And I think with drones and infrared cameras, I think with AI technology, I think this problem definitely can be solved to a large extent, because now with drones you can actually cover a very large area. With infrared cameras, you are able to actually look at the imagery of
But
heat emitting objects.
It's hundreds and thousands of miles.
It is. So you have to have hundreds of drones
thousands
coordinating with each other and trying to figure
takes,
out who is trying to
right.
inflate at any given point in time. So
It's not a small pocket of it's a huge area, and it's not an easy terrain. I was watching some documentaries lately on like how Israel is able to do it, and those borders are very small. Here you're talking in hundreds and miles and thousands of miles, and with a tough terrain,
Yeah.
and with the winter season which Kashmir has,
Yeah.
it's not easy to monitor. So unless you take control of those tough terrains, I don't think there is any other way out. You can continue doing these surgical strikes, wait for a year till they regroup, and then they again.
So your prescription is, number one, work on the ideology. Number
That is
two,
a long-term solution.
That's a long-term solution. But number two, take control of the tough terrain border areas to make sure that there is no infiltration from there.
Immediately.
Third is to basically let everyone know that the government means business. Basically dispense justice to the people who have been wronged.
Right.
And the fourth, obviously, is teach Pakistan a lesson that it would think twice before launching an attack like this. Going back to the Pakistan angle here, I think you mentioned that Pakistan was trying to distract from some of the losses that they had in Balochistan and elsewhere. I kind of see it in a slightly different way as well. Pakistan had skirmishes with Iran last year. They've had a lot of skirmishes with the Taliban and Afghanistan on the northern side of things. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And they have BLA, who's basically kicking their ass, so to say. And so given where they are already well entrenched, I don't think Pakistan has.
And Sindhis right now on the streets because of the water.
Because of water.
The canal issues.
Yes. So given that, I don't think there is any strategic imperative for them to open up another front, and a big front with India, because that's only going to distract them from the enemies that they have on the three other fronts.
Right, but that kind of, if you look at it, if you give it a different spin, that unites them as well.
A fight against India.
Yeah, because you now, instead of having 4 enemies within, you find one common enemy outside you, and you mobilize the whole crowd, and then you blame on India, saying that they were the ones who were responsible for the Balochistan and all of these, right? So it's the sentiment of the country. If they had a limited war with India, obviously people of Pakistan will side with the army chief, even though he is responsible for what all happened. But the way they will portray it in their media, they will make look India responsible for their own problems.
So, on the topic of the Kashmiri Pandits who have been displaced from Kashmir, is there any chance that you see any way that they would go back and get rehabilitated?
See,
is there even an interest there?
No, there is an interest. Obviously, there is an interest. I want, like any other Hindu, I want to take my son to my motherland. I want to show him where I came from. I'm not saying that I'm gonna go and settle there, but there are people in our community who want to go and settle down back in their homeland. But can they go now with these? Is the environment conducive enough that they can go back? No, because we cannot go there and be sitting like a sitting ducks for them. So that as I said before, Pahalgam, we are having in every 3rd to 4th month we will see a terror attack on our people, and people who actually were non-Kashmiri Hindus but Punjabi Hindus. There are some examples who are running successful businesses in Kashmir since they never had the domicile certificate before 370 was abrogated. Now after 370, since they have been working in Kashmir, running businesses for so many years, they got the certificate, and some of them got killed. Target, there was a jeweler who got killed. There was a son of a very famous restaurant, Daba. He was just 25, 26 years old. So they are trying to send out a message that you cannot settle here We will not let you change the demographics. And what is the final solution of Kashmir to me is change in demographics. You have to change the demographics of that state. As long as it's Muslim majority in Kashmir, no matter what you do, this is bound to happen. Because even if 50% of the population is radicalized, that's a big number.
Yep.
How will you prevent it? You cannot put an army man after every person. Then that goes against the whole. So change in demographics, and 370, as I said, was a very welcoming step. But that's not the end of it. That was a precursor for the long-term solution.
Does anything prevent now after 370? Does anything prevent from the people outside of Kashmir to go and buy land and settle in Kashmir, other than the actual law and order situation?
I don't think even if we have abrogated 370, anyone can go and buy land there. I don't think so. There are still some conditions which you have to meet. You still have to have a domicile certificate.
Okay.
And you have to have some. I may be wrong because they keep changing. So I think you have to have 15 years of stay in the state. Then you are eligible for the domicile, and that might have changed now, but from what I remember last. So it's not that you want to go to Kashmir and buy a land, you can just go and do it. I don't think even after abrogation of 370 you can do that. You still have to have a domicile.
Okay.
But the conditions for domicile, they might have relaxed those a little bit. Maybe 15. That's what I heard last was 15 years. So like ex-servicemen, for example, if you have served in Kashmir in military, and if your total, that service term is 15 years, then you qualify for the domicile. But again, there is some conditions.
So many restrictions make it difficult for people to go and settle there.
It's not that easy as they say that anybody can go. No, anybody can go and visit and come back, spend all his money, but not.
We'll take the money. We don't need you.
Yeah. And they are good in that hospitality and all that. If you go, that's what the videos I see those videos on the media news and all that. See, they can't fool us. We have already seen them firsthand, so we know all this media news and all that which is coming out of the Kashmir right now, and they're trying to do candlelight and all of that. We have seen it all.
It's all distilled. It's all for show.
Yeah, it's for those who don't know them.
What would your message be to the people who believe Kashmir is still open for tourism, who still want to go to Kashmir as tourists?
I mean, it's their personal choice. Till what happened in Pahalgam, it was more of Kashmiri Hindus killings, right? So as I said, and I want to quote all the on your channel, Pahalgam, since now we are talking about Pahalgam, is not the only massacre, Hindu massacre, which has happened in Kashmir. And if I can, so 1990 genocide, which we all spoke about, 1997 Sangrampura massacre. 8 Hindus were taken out, singled out and killed.
And that was when Clinton was here, correct?
1998 Vandama massacre. 23 Hindus were singled out, kids, women, men, everybody were killed. And there were little, I can send you the pictures. 2-year-old kid was also killed. 2000 Chetty Singhpura massacre. 35 Sikhs were killed in a village. They were all singled out and killed. 2000 Amarnath massacre. We don't know the actual toll. They say it's somewhere between 99 to 107. More than 100 people. Nandimarg massacre, 2003. 24 Hindus were killed. Same template, what we saw. Then Pulwama, security forces, we saw 40 of our armed forces were killed. Then Rajouri in 2023, 2 years back, there were 7 people killed in a village. Same format. Then 2024 last year, Riyasi, as I said, 9 pilgrims were killed. And then you have this Pahalgam, 26. So it's nothing new. That's what I'm saying. It's nothing new. It's the same thing happening over and over. It just opens our wounds, basically, for us. When we see all these things, it just opens our wounds. which have never healed, by the way. It just reopens them.
Well, it's a very sad story, a story that hasn't found its closure. It basically continues on and on. And every new massacre is a reminder of that story, which basically, on one hand, tells us the cost of complacency, because we tend to forget and we tend to forgive. Um, but I think, to your point, there are going to be some short term solutions, there are going to be long term solutions. I think the government of India is definitely taking some immediate steps to go after Pakistan. But I think there have to be some of the long-term steps that need to be taken to be able to, mend the population's mindset in a much more inclusive way. So I think that's definitely going to be one problem that we will have to deal with for maybe one full generation before we're able to see peace return to the valley, if it happens in our lifetime.
And we have to, I just want to add this before we close. If you ask me what my goal is, to raise awareness. That's what our community is doing. We don't want another Kashmir to unfold in India or in anywhere in the world. Because the way we are seeing things happening in West Bengal right now, or Kerala, we don't want to see Kerala files or West Bengal files shortly. So if we can bring in that necessary awareness within our community, within our family, to start with family, because we always shy away talking these things with our kids. But these things has to be discussed, and they have to be made aware about the ground realities, because there is an ideology out there who doesn't want you to continue your faith, who doesn't want you to live. So unless we really look into that and bring in that necessary awareness about the ground reality, we all are stuck in this loop. So we don't have to be we are just reacting now what happened to Pahalgam. But these things, if we can prevent them, I don't know how. That's a separate discussion altogether. Yeah. But we have to have at least be aware of the history, because history does repeat itself. So if we are not aware of our history, then we'll again fall in the same trap.
And I think part of my intent on this channel is to raise that awareness and bring someone like you, who has not only been personally impacted by this, but also has seen some of these events from such a close distance and understood them with all the minute details and minutiae, and thought of how to address some of these problems. And I think my intent is to be able to bring some of that voice and that thought to many others, because some of these things are not being talked about in publicly in as much candid voice as it should be. So thank you for coming on our show, and thank you for talking about all of this in such a frank and honest manner. We really appreciate your time and your input, and thank you so much for all you shared.
Thank you, Kapilji.
Namaste. Okay.
Thanks.